Alright, RWBY Volume 3, World of Remnant 2, Huntsman. In my opinion, the best World of Remnant we've had so far. This one tells us a lot of information that we didn't actually know and gives us a lot to think about in a good way, not in a infuriating way like the Aura one with Huntsman drinking his coffee. So let's get started. The first thing that's really interesting is the name of the Atlas Huntsman Academy is Atlas. Yes, we didn't know, this is the only academy we didn't know the name of, except we did. It is the academy of the now defunct Mantle, which explains what Wise meant in the last episode, or the chapter, when she said that Vale has a separate government and academy, that they're separate. Now, what we can gather from this is that Atlas is basically a very military controlled kingdom, which really, Mantle is now defunct, so I'm assuming that Atlas is also the kingdom, which means that Ironwood in Atlas has a lot of power, really, because he's the headmaster of Atlas and he's the general of the military, which we'll get back to later in the view, but this will be interesting. So next they talk about the combat schools. Now we know, for instance, there's Signal in Vale and there's Sanctum in Mistral. That's the only two combat schools we know of so far, at least the names of. But what we didn't know, at least so far, I'd assumed that combat schools were just getting ready for the Huntsman academies like Beacon, Shade, Haven and Atlas. But what they're saying in the World of Remnant is that the best, specifically says that the ones with like the best of the best in the combat schools go to Huntsman academies. Now what this tells me is that the combat schools aren't just for huntsmen and huntresses, that they are also for people that has to go to the military and possibly even the police. So that's interesting. I mean, they don't confirm it, but that's at least how I gathered it. And that huntsmen and huntresses are really just like the best of the best in these combat schools. Like we can see, even if you go back to the Yellow trailer, how Yang like beats up people that are a lot older than her. So we have to assume it's because like she is one of these top class people. Now, as we were told in the last World of Remnant, the Vital Festival tournament, these academies were established after the war about 80 years ago, where the world leaders decided they wanted peace over bloodshed. Now, as we learn in this World of Remnant, there are some things they set in motion to help promote peace between the kingdoms. One of them being the reason that people are forming groups. Now, working in these groups, as we learn, isn't just about learning how to work with strangers, which is an important part in this kind of work because it is a dangerous line of work, but it is also to learn things like communication and empathy. And we have seen this in Team RWBY. We have learned, if you look at Wise, compare Volume 1 Wise to Volume 3 Wise, she has gotten a lot warmer. I guess you could say the ice cream has gotten warmer. She's a lot nicer to her teammates, even Blake. And she has learned a lot of empathy and communication. If you look at, again, Blake, like she's opened up a lot, learned to communicate when she got problems to her teammates and to trust them. And RWBY, the socially awkward person from Volume 1, has learned to communicate and become a great leader. Like even Sean, to some degree, has gotten better at communication. So this actually makes a lot of sense, because if you think about it, if the only reason for groups was to work with strangers, they wouldn't keep them in the same group for 4 years, because they're already like a family now and they're still only in their first year. I mean, think about when you go to an class at school. The teachers want you to work with different people. They don't have you in the same group, no. They have you in one group, in one project, and the next to put in an entirely different group. So this actually makes a lot of sense, and as we've seen, it actually does work, from what we can gather, at least from Team RWBY. Another thing that the Four Kingdoms did to ensure peace between the kingdoms is the fact that once a Huntsman and Huntress has graduated, they're completely neutral. They have no allegiances. So when Team RWBY graduates from Beacon, they're not obligated to work for Vale. They have a mission board where they can work with whoever they want to work with and do whatever kind of work they want. I'm guessing it's kind of like back in Field Trip in Volume 2, or just like search and destroy, rescue missions and so forth, and they can do whatever they want. Now, going back to Atlas. Atlas has been kind of criticized because there seems to be some kind of indoctrination of its members to be like, well, yes, technically you can do whatever you want, but you should work with Atlas. And they specifically show Ironwood and Winter. Now this kind of puts both Ironwood and Winter in a completely different light, and it's very interesting, really. I'm very intrigued by how this goes. It's gonna go in the future. In fact, with all this new stuff about Atlas, I can't help but wonder, why did Mantle become defunct? Was it because that Atlas rose to power that Mantle became defunct? Or did Atlas rise to power because Mantle stopped working for whatever reason? I'm really intrigued by this, and we don't really have any information to go by. Like all World of Remnants, am I right? Now, what really stands out for me in this is there's a lot of foreshadowing with Atlas like being bad guys, and if you think back, there's been 2 World of Remnants now, both the previous one and Kingdoms in Volume 2, where they've like foreshadowed that there's probably going to be some kind of war between kingdoms, and this points that possibly it's going to be Atlas and Vale are going to be enemies. If that happens, that's going to add a lot of drama, because look at who we have on the 2 sides. On one hand, we have Osbin and Ironwood. They obviously seem like good friends, just at heads, like then they don't agree with how they should proceed with things. But at this, they're not entirely at the point where I think they could go to war. But possibly. But where it really gets interesting is Winter and Weiss. Winter is in the Atlas military, and from what we can gather, she's high up in the military, and they've just kind of suggested that she's been indoctrinated into the military, which makes you think, how is the war between Atlas and Vale gonna affect Weiss and Winter? Because the way I see it, there can only 2 outcomes. One, they stay on each side and become enemies, or one of them changes sides. Now, how likely is it for them to change sides? Well, I don't think Weiss is going to defect to Atlas, even though she obviously really cares for and loves and adores Winter. However, I don't think so, because, well, not only has she gotten really close with all of Team RWBY, especially RWBY herself, like the person, to the point where it's pretty obvious that she does consider RWBY her BFF, even if she denies it. But Atlas is also her father, which she really clearly does not like at all. And if you look at some of the lyrics that was in the song during the Auburn fight, Jeff Williams has released the lyrics, I'll put a link in the description. It seems to be Winter singing to her father, at least from my eye got it, about now it's my time to break free. And so I feel like she's not going to defect. But what about Winter? Would Winter defect and pick her sister? It's hard to say, because it's obvious she loves Weiss. Just maybe not like obvious with it, but she definitely does care about Weiss. But like we can see, she's kind of been indoctrinated, and she is a very orderly, straight person. So would she pick Atlas or Weiss? If this is all just if this war happens, but I'm not sure really, because they both seem likely. And there's a third pairing, Penny and RWBY. Now, you could say the team RWBY, but I'm going to go more specifically to the person RWBY, because it's very obvious that RWBY is the person she's the closest to. She's the one person that knows her secret, that shouldn't know her secret, and so from what we know, he hasn't told anyone. And RWBY very obviously cares much about Penny as a friend. So what would Penny do? I feel like Penny is more likely to, defect and pick RWBY's side than Winter is. I could see Penny like going with Team RWBY rather than Atlas, because they're actual friends and stuff like that. But then again, there is Penny's father, which she obviously adores a lot, and we don't know who her father is. So see it. When I first watched the World of Remnant, I was like, we kind of knew that, but I didn't know about Mantle, but there was so much underlying stuff that it like foreshadows, but it doesn't feel annoying. It's just like, I'm just really intrigued, like, where's this gonna go? Also, as some people have pointed out, the two people you see, the two Huntsman and Hunters you see, the purple and yellow one, look a lot like the Huntsman and Huntress on the statues in front of Beacon. The same that you see Sean looking up at in the first intro. And considering how Sean looks up at it in that way, and the sword who looks a lot like his sword, it makes you wonder, is that Sean's forefather? Because, it's a hand-me-down, like he said in Volume 1. And is this going to have any kind of relevance? Maybe? You don't know, but it's interesting to say. Note. And the last thing we get from Ozpin is not to succumb to the darkness. I don't know if that's some kind of foreshadowing or not, but I'm not sure what it would foreshadow. Like, does it mean that Huntsmen and Huntresses have darkness in them that could overtake them? Or something? I'm a little bit unclear on what they might mean with that, if they even mean anything by it. Like, was Cinder once a Huntress who, like, went to the dark side? I don't know. Okay. And the last thing I have to mention, the art style and the animation in this volume's World of Remnant is gorgeous. It is amazing. Like, I almost didn't notice I didn't pick up on all the details the first time watching this one video, just because I was just looking at how beautiful it looks this season. Like, it looked fine last volume, I didn't have anything against it, but this just beats it out of the water. Like, huge props to whoever made this. I don't know how many did it, it was like one or several, but major props. I hope we continue to have more like this. Well, anyway, that was my kind of sort of review thoughts, opinions on the World of Remnant 2, Huntsman. For all like 2 or 3 of you that actually watch this video, feel free to leave comments if you think I missed anything or think I was right about something or just want to discuss. Just go ahead. So, well, see you sometime.